So I guess nobody from the administration's coming tonight. That's okay.
Yeah, if you want to request anybody, we can do that.
No,
They didn't feel that they-
no, that's fine. It's completely up to them.
And we're live.
Started
Yeah, we're good.
All right, I would like to call the Ravenna City Council special meeting of June 24th to order. Chelsea, would you call the roll? Oh, read the, what do we do first?
I can read the call first.
Okay.
You are hereby notified that a special meeting of the Ravenna City Council has been called for Monday, June 24th, 2024 at 6 p.m. The purpose of the meeting is to hold a work session to discuss the regular meeting agenda, delegations and public remarks in general, including a consent agenda, rules of procedure, cleaning up the code, and no formal actions will be taken at this meeting.
Okay, could you call the roll?
Mr. Kelty?
Here.
Ms. West? Here. Mr. Moskin?
Yes.
Ms. Wood? Ms. Michael? Mr. Maravich?
Here.
Mr. Harper?
Could we have a motion to excuse Ms. Wood, Ms. Michael, and Mr. Harper?
So moved.
Yes, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so Chelsea went through the agenda. I'm not sure how long this is going to take. Remind me if it's getting long, because we can break this up to another meeting. I think, though, if you looked at the packet, and we've kind of discussed a lot of these things already, unless we have major disagreements about how to handle some of this stuff, we might get through it rather quickly, but there is a fair amount of content to get through. So the first thing I want to talk about is the meeting agenda, the regular meeting agenda, the meeting we hold on the first Monday of every month. And in our code, chapter 220.09 lists the agenda. So I'm using my computer tonight to kind of guide us through. Boy, this is going to be fun. Let me see if I can enlarge this. So I already took the liberty of changing some things. Now, these are not all set in stone, okay? I don't know if you can see that well enough. But this is our, with some modifications, the agenda we use at our regular meetings. And I put in red some of the things that we might consider changing. So obviously, we call things to order. We have that moment of meditation and silence. We pledge to the allegiance to the flag. And then the clerk calls the roll, see if we have a quorum. And we do have a quorum tonight, just barely. But we're not taking any action, so that doesn't matter. So the next thing I put in there was approval of the agenda. Now, we don't usually do that, but we have been known from time to time to change the agenda. So I thought at this point, before we actually get started with our business, we could make sure everyone is okay with what's in that agenda for that night, and if we want to make some changes. And it's going to get a little bit convoluted tonight because I'm going to talk a little, like intersperse a conversation about the consent agenda. And let me just say right off, if you're not familiar with what that is, that's a component, I think Robert's Rules of Order calls it a consent calendar. But it's basically the bundling of a number of items that council or any board could consider less significant, something we pass pro forma. And so we can bundle it all in one part, like the minutes, the reports that we get from all the different departments. If there's an appointment by the mayor to a specific board, things like that. And it could include some ordinances, and we'll talk about that when we get to that part of the agenda tonight. But I also thought the approval of the agenda could also be the moment where somebody could pick something out of the consent agenda and put it into the regular. Because part of the consent agenda is it has to be a consensus, a unanimous consensus amongst the body that we all agree to whatever is in that consent agenda to approve. So if there's anything that needs discussion, anything that somebody wants or has concerns with, we can just pull it out of the consent agenda and put it in the regular agenda. So there could be a more full discussion of it. So that's why I thought maybe approval of the agenda, just to make sure, you know, what we have on paper for that night doesn't need any changes, and also the option to pull something out of the consent agenda. That make sense? Okay.
So right now, we don't approve the agenda. I've been in meetings before where that was a common part of the practice. What is the purpose of approving the agenda right here? Does it limit what we can put on the agenda? Does that mean we cannot bring an additional item forward that night? Is it just so that we're sure that this is the only things covered? What's the purpose of it?
Well, I think a lot of what we're talking about tonight is just sort of like codifying our practices. And we've done this in the past. We've said, oh, we're going to take something out of the agenda. We're going
Yes.
to add something that got, so
And
this would just be a formal placement before anything gets started where we actually do that.
When we do that, have we done it by a vote? Or, no, we just say want to take it off? Okay.
And I think too, also being able to just, to pull things out of the consent agenda at that point, to take them off. So if there's something pressing in the consent agenda that someone doesn't feel needs to be just moved forward, that gives us the opportunity to do it then, right? Is that,
Yeah, although you could do that as part of the consent agenda item too.
Okay.
I mean, which comes right after approval of the agenda.
It's a difficult discussion right now because it's kind of two new things going in at one time. Just to bounce back and forth, the consent agenda that I have been familiar with in the past, the number of items get put on there. And they get put on by the council president, the clerk. Once they know what the items are that are going to go on there, approval of this contract or other. And when I have worked with it before, upon notification, like of the Friday before, any member of council at that time could request something to be moved out for individual consideration, which we could do then, or we could just wait until the Monday night and ask for it to move out. The mechanism for something to be moved out of it, I'm not sure how we do it. Do we do it here? Do we do it the
You do
Friday
both
before?
ways. So just so you know, so I've kind of thought about how this might work, and I didn't envision like the clerk or me
the game.
arbitrarily making that decision.
Cranked too
I thought we would decide at the committee of the whole. The committee of the whole is basically a work session where we prepare for the regular agenda, and as we go through each item in the committee of the whole, we can decide if that's something we want to put in the consent agenda. And then someone could change their mind, within that week between, or whenever time between the committee of the whole and our regular meeting, even at the regular meeting, at any time in between, somebody can pull something from the consent agenda.
So as a suggestion, like if we're taking things like working through committee, like moving those forward to the committee of the whole, it might not be a bad idea if we were to adopt this, we'd say, hey, at that point for the committee of the whole, do we want to push this towards the consent agenda or a line item and make that something for?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
that might be a cleaner way of saying, hey, what are we expecting discussion on versus here's a bunch of things that everyone's already in agreement of that this is just things that need done or will be approved as anticipated.
So keep it as flexible as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a mechanism for doing it. I think there would be a little bit of a learning curve for council on
And the
what
public, too.
needs to go, because
Right.
my idea of what needs to go and your idea of what needs to go may be a little bit different. I might be okay for moving any item forward that's applying for a grant. You might not,
Right.
because you want to know what the city's contribution to the grant is going to be.
Well,
I don't know.
Hopefully that information would be part
Would've
of
already
the
come
packet
out,
anyway.
yeah.
But you're right, I mean, and that's the beauty of making it as flexible as possible. At any moment, anybody could pull it out and there's no discussion, it just happens.
Now, when you say anybody, what if the public comes in with a
No.
particular concern for a line item in that consent agenda? And they, like, let's say that they email Chelsea in advance and they say, hey, I want a few minutes to talk about this before it gets voted on at this meeting.
Ah, well,
How do we
that's, oh,
incorporate
okay.
that as a concept?
Well, we're
So-
going to talk about public comment, so that's a good point. I don't have an answer for that, other than I think it's council's decision.
Would not the input on that come whenever we address they would see the consent agenda and what's on it, and prior to the meeting, that's when they would decide that they wanted to comment. It depends on if you're going to split public comment into sections of right after the agenda is adopted, anybody that wants to speak on anything there, or if you're waiting till the end, which would be a moot point.
Yeah.
But we also, do you want comment on every item as it comes down the list? I don't know.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the possibility of the public wanting to comment on something in the consent agenda. That's, I think, I kept it as delegations from the public, but they could certainly still talk about it, but by then it would have been approved unless somebody else took it out. So we can do a number of things. We could move the delegations above approving the agenda so that, you know, I feel uncomfortable for some reason just saying that anybody from the public can simply remove something from the consent agenda. But do you think that's a good idea?
I think we want to have that opportunity for the feedback from the public.
But here's the thing, what if some, and I know that we have an audience here today, so don't think I'm talking about you, but what if we have some rabble-rouser come in and say they want to take everything out of the consent agenda?
Well,
And we have a rule that says if the public can do that, we have to abide by it.
But I would think if someone from the public reached out to us and one of us had a concern, then one of us could decide to
Right.
take it off the consent
I agree.
agenda. So if we're like, yeah, you know what, that's a really good point, maybe we shouldn't paint all our houses pink. Let's have a conversation about it. I think that would make more sense. So it would probably have to come from one of us. And that
Right.
certainly is still getting that feedback from the public, but it's us that makes that final decision.
The discussion of any ordinance would have gone through committee,
And the committee of the
would
whole
have,
as well.
would have had an opportunity to speak to it then. And the committee of the whole, would someone have an opportunity to speak then if they had a concern on it?
Well, I think the discussion about public comment,
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk specifically about what happens at the regular agenda, but I really haven't thought, and I wanted to get feedback from people on council because the committees are run by different chairs. And so I want to know what you think about how public comment should be handled at the committee level. I'm kind of feeling like the committee of the whole should be similar to the regular meeting. But the other committees, I think, and it could even be variable, maybe let the chair decide how they want public, I don't know. But I know this is gonna keep intersecting. But let's try to focus back here. So one question could be then, should we have delegations from the public above the approval of the agenda?
What if we had, for folks that did, because I know like the Board of Education previously had, like, if you wanted to speak to the board, you'd have to pretty much sign up prior. I think it was, what, one
Yeah,
day in
well, we're gonna
advance?
talk about that.
But that might, but using that opportunity to say, if you want to speak about something that's in that bundle, then you may have an opportunity to speak first. Otherwise, public delegations might be later in the agenda.
We have two different types of people that speak at the board meeting. Some are bringing a new issue forward. They're bringing an informational issue forward. They're campaigning. They're coming in. So we got a lot of different ones. And then we have somebody that's wanting to speak about some ordinance that's on there. Although my experience is, once we're at the meeting and the ordinance is on there, there's not a whole lot of comment that has gone into it at that time. The comments more gone in during the committee meeting before, hasn't it?
It's true, But there have been many regular meetings where agenda items have taken up a lot of time and a lot of discussion and a lot of debate.
So would it hurt
Like
to
the-
switch it and put it before the approval of the agenda? And then that way.
It
if-
wouldn't, I wouldn't see it would hurt.
I just feel like then if somebody really wants to be heard and they come in whatever process we have, they still have the opportunity to be heard before we vote on it because
Yeah,
obviously.
it might make it simpler in the sense that, I mean, we could get advance notice, an email, a phone call to the clerk or whatever, saying, hey, I don't think this should be in the consent agenda. But if we put the delegations from the public right after the roll call, then that could cover it as well. And then if anybody on council wants to say, you know, this person mentioned this thing in the consent agenda, I'd like to pull it out. Or you could say, no, this person just causing problems, let's leave it in there, you know, I mean, but at least, so let's do that. I'm gonna see if I can do this. I don't know how this is gonna work.
I mean, if they did reach out to us in advance, that would be part of the communication section, wouldn't it?
Okay.
Yeah,
Is the agenda, okay, the agenda is just mentioned in 2020-10, right?
I don't remember I think
It
it's
is
9.
in-
Isn't 9 or 10?
I got it. It's in.
Okay, the order of business
both.
is,
The agenda is 09.
So 09's the order
the
of
actual,
business.
the actual.
Yeah, what we're looking at, what we were just looking
Okay,
at here
agenda.
is 09.
And then
2020-10 speaks about the agenda in general.
Yeah, but it-
Shall prepare for each meeting, distribute copies.
Right.
Schedule resolutions, et cetera. But the agenda itself is 09 all the way through.
Yeah, for its
Okay.
definition.
I'll fix the lettering, numbering, whatever here. But right now, we've got the call, this may take a lot longer than I thought. Call to order, meditation and silence, pledge of allegiance, roll call, then delegations from the public. So the next thing, and when we get through with the agenda, we'll talk about public comment. Maybe that'll be the next topic. I think it was on the agenda anyway. So approval of the agenda, and I took the minutes out because we can put that in, I don't know that anybody disagrees with putting the minutes in the consent agenda. Communications as well would just go into the consent agenda, because we rarely ever
we're
talk
just
about that.
approving that we received the communications, right? Really is saying that's.
Yeah, we don't really do anything with the communication.
Periodically, do we bump over to you, Chelsea, that you've gotten something additionally, or?
Sometimes something
is
comes in
somebody-
the day of.
The
and-
day of,
yeah.
and they've, yeah, it doesn't make any
And
difference.
that could still be mentioned. Okay, so then we've moved the delegations up. The reports of officials and boards goes into the consent agenda. And so actually, and this is confusing, but the next item, after approval of the agenda, would be to vote on the consent agenda. Okay? All right. And then I added invited department head. So, and I don't know if we want to use that wording, but that was brought up, that do we want to have a regular sort of educational, addition to the regular agenda where we invite, and we don't always have to, if there's nobody invited for that month, we just skip through it.
I feel like it would be better to have a schedule
Okay.
because then everyone knows when they're going to be up. And I feel like we have this technology, and if the department head can't be here physically, they can Zoom in. We can get it to work, make sure it works ahead of time. God bless it. We have enough technology.
There may be some
And it
challenges.
always does, like clockwork. it
That's a
just-
laugh.
But so we practice it and make sure it works, right?
At least give it as an option. So
But
if
I
they do
feel
No,
like.
no,
so then
I
that way-
agree with you.
'cause I don't
We'll
want-
get it right.
I don't want the department heads to feel like we're punishing them.
Right.
The way I saw it is it's an opportunity for them to share what's going on in their department, to share what's coming up in the future, to share what the heck they're gonna be asking for money for pretty soon, so that when we go to vote on it, we're not asking a bunch of ridiculous questions that we already know. And if we have a rotating schedule, we have a rotating schedule, and maybe Tim Content can't come for February, and he switches with the chief of police, just to let us know, just so they have that rotation, so they know that in that month, it's their 5 minutes to come and present to council on what's going on in their department.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I don't have any concern about it. Does anybody else?
No, I kind of like the idea for the rotation.
And I think it's very educational for us.
I believe they should physically be here.
Yeah, well, that's the idea.
Well-
Well, I mean, okay, but, all right, so you're opposed to the telecommuting in?
Yes, I am, because I quit keeping track of all the times that there were problems. Go to connect, and it doesn't connect, or partially connect, and it goes in and out.
Yeah, but
And then-
life happens sometimes.
Sometimes this has happened,
I-
more than half the times. It's happened 5 minutes before the meeting, try to get connected, try to
But we
have a
also- but keep in
conversation
mind,
starts, and
We
then.
have an IT person now. We did not
Yeah.
have that position
Well,
before.
let's do this,
I don't
though.
like to go assume
There's-
on
there's-
anything.
There's nothing that we have to decide tonight.
Yeah.
In other words, we're not going to put invited department head must be present in person. But I think the expectation should be that they come in person. Now, if there's some reason they can't, then I think just like anybody else, like if one of you can't, I think we need to be more conscious of making that exception when we can.
There was an example of, where'd that pile go? On the top one, there was like, the wording of it, it was,
This one from Mayfield Village?
just look, it has. Oh, yeah, department head reports, and then it lists everybody out,
Yeah.
so, yeah. That's-
Okay, but that's everybody.
Yeah, but we would.
Well, we rotate them, right, okay. All right, so we'll fight the battle of zooming people in the future, but
If we
we'll
have
have, but we'll have the expectation that they're gonna, and I don't know why they wouldn't want to come in person anyway.
And there are some best practices for if you are telecommuting, like don't use Wi-Fi, use an Ethernet connection to improve and remove those issues that can be problematic at times.
Yeah,
The issues usually aren't on the other end.
yeah.
The issues are usually here. So I think, I'm confident that.
Well,
those
and
things can
remember,
be-
we've got a complicated situation where we're not just here and zooming somebody in, but then there's a whole audience of people on YouTube. So that's where things kind of get messed up. All right, let's move on. Are we okay with the agenda? I'm not going to go back and repeat everything, but we're up to invited department head, and we're good with that. So the next thing would be reports of committees, introduction of ordinances and resolutions. So we tend to give our reports orally. And we could debate this, but I think, maybe we can continue to do that. If you'd rather we give our reports in written format, we could put them in the consent agenda. But we might get some pushback from people having to, council members having to write out reports.
So,
And our reports are usually, I got 3 items on the agenda,
Yeah,
we're having a meeting next week.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
so-
that's, I wouldn't see right now, if that's what the extent of our report is, the need for it to be written.
Right.
I do have a question, though, about into 2020-09, it says reports of committee, introduction of ordinances and resolutions.
Right.
And so, right now, all that is we say, I have 3 ordinances on
You want to,
tonight,
We could
and
take-
we will have a meeting there. I don't know of anybody that, last 4 years, that has done a report.
no, well, except for Parks and Rec, the cemetery, they give a report.
But they're not a committee. Those two are,
Yeah.
Yeah, we are.
Put them in there.
wait a second, those are not a
Yeah, that's a
committee of
sep-
council.
Okay, that's different.
Those,
As ordained by
it's
ordinance.
a,
You want, we could change, let's change this, okay? First of all, we could take out introduction of ordinance, because I think that it's just a placeholder, and I don't think, we don't do it.
we don't do it.
And we do it later on, because we have first reading of ordinances of resolutions, second reading, and third reading, so it's already there. And even the next one is just an explanation, it's not really an agenda item. All ordinances will be read by title only. I mean,
And
That's really not an agenda item,
And that's
right?
said in a different portion,
Right.
part of.
We changed that when I was on council, because it used to say that we read the entire ordinance. And they never did, they just read the title anyway.
Is it in the charter that
No,
was changed?
it's, I don't know which,
I mean, it's in
in our
there someplace else that
Yeah,
it
'cause we-
says you can just, you read the title only.
unless a council member wants you to
Yeah.
read more,
Ask
other
for it.
portions of it, or in the entirety.
I'm not complaining about the
No,
reports of committee, I'm
But-
just saying
but
what
should
we
we-
have done
Should
in
we,
the past.
should we put boards of committee and,
Appointed, appointed board.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about what happens. So we go around and we say, I've got 3 items on tonight, and I will have a meeting.
right,
And then their 3 items are not in consecutive order on the ordinances, are they?
Yes.
Yes.
They're always right next to each other?
I think it's the same order, like, public health and safety is usually first, and,
They're close.
Okay, so they're right together, okay?
yeah. I
So
don't know when they pick those.
then we
orders.
go to them and they talk about each one.
Yeah, as
So
part of
that's
each
where the
ordinance.
real introduction of
But
the
it also
ordinance
says
is.
that in the, in our code, that each ordinance will be reported on by a member of council
Yes,
from that
okay.
committee.
Okay,
So, but that, it doesn't have to be in the agenda, right? I mean, that's just how we do.
how we do it.
Yeah, so we could take what's right now I out completely, I don't know. It's more just a description than an agenda item, unless you want me to leave it in there.
I'm okay, I have a high tolerance for ambiguity. It's okay right now as we're talking about this. Don't anybody get upset. It's all.
No, it's okay.
When we're talking about, look at what 2020-09 says it is. It's the order of business. If that is truly the order of business, some of these things are okay to be in there because that's the order in which they're doing it. We're talking about that also being the agenda. That's kind of 2 different things, isn't it?
No, because part,
No.
two, can't remember the number. 2020-10 actually talks about the agenda and points to 2020.
Okay, I see. This agenda shall follow the form of the order of business
Set forth,
as
yeah.
set forth in 2009, and shall ordinarily list and identify purpose of appearances by persons in delegation, subject matter of petitions, remonstrations and ordinances or resolutions to be introduced, the schedule of ordinance or resolutions to be read first, second, third reading, important subjects of committee reports and items of new business.
We can go back and change part of this section of our, but I think the important thing to me is that it points to 2020.09 as the agenda.
Yeah, okay.
So when
Okay.
Chelsea prepares our agendas for the regular meeting, it has to follow
Okay.
that format. Okay. My only question is, do we need all ordinances will be read by title? I mean, it's not really an agenda item. It's just telling us something. So I'm going to suggest we take it out, okay? Because I don't think it serves any purpose, and it's already in our ordinance. And then, so after reports of committees, and maybe we just leave it that way. We do just regularly report from Parks and Recs and the cemetery. I don't think we report from anything else. We can either put those particular ones in there, or if you're okay with ambiguity, we can just kind of leave it as reports of committees. Okay. And then we get the first reading of ordinances and resolutions, second reading, third reading, old business, new business, and then we added president of council remarks, council member remarks, mayor's remarks, and adjournment. Is there anything else we should add into the listing of items in the agenda?
Do we, I saw, in looking through some of those agendas, they had like swearing-ins and stuff like that listed in some. Is that something that are we just doing that before our meetings?
Yeah, we do that before our meetings. We don't usually include that
Yeah.
in the meeting.
Because I know in the past, we have called to order and then done stuff. We have, but it's been listed, like we've had it on the agenda as something that's going to happen.
See, that's problematic because it's not supposed to be, and this is the
Yeah.
agenda.
So, but that's why, and I made me think of it because when I was looking through that, there are some
You sure they were
municipalities-
regular meetings and not like committee of the whole meetings or,
I don't remember.
yeah?
I just
It
thought.
might have been a special meeting.
Yeah, I thought of it just because there was a couple in there that had that listed as the agenda, in the agenda if it was needed.
Let's
And it
just
doesn't
stick
have
to
be.
our business.
Yeah, we can always keep that before, and just not do it during council meetings.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. All right, then, so I'm gonna, I think we're, and you know, this, okay, and so the plan is, and I've said this before, we'll bundle whatever we've kind of informally have agreed to move on to, in this case, the planning committee. So we'll have time, and the people who aren't here tonight will have time to talk about it. And then see where we go in changing ordinances. And then we'll have a public meeting so that the public can comment on any of the changes we're considering before we actually vote on them, or you
So-
guys do.
So I'm trying to understand still the consent agenda piece, which I don't disagree with it at all. I think it's a great idea. But if I have an item and I just have a simple question on it, does it have to be pulled out of the consent agenda to be asked a simple question?
I think you can ask a clarifying question.
Okay.
I don't think
I think
there's a,
sometimes that's really
I think
what
you
it is. It was, hey, can you confirm the cost of whatever, you know?
Yeah.
We have those kind of questions a lot, and I wasn't sure if that would entail pulling it from
yeah,
the
but if
consent
we
agenda.
start getting into a debate and people are, you know, there's a lot, then I think at that moment, somebody should just pull it out. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the public comment stuff. Let's switch gears and talk about that, and then we'll talk about the consent agenda. So in 2010, which Dr. Calfee was just reading from, it actually talks about, and I've highlighted it here, the delegations. It says, shall ordinarily list the identity and purpose of appearances by persons and delegations. And we do that when we know in advance, but we don't always know in advance. So I had one question. I don't have an answer to this, and I'm curious to hear what your opinion is, because it was brought up before. So we have two types of public comments. One is just people who want to come in and talk about something. Maybe it's something they want us to act on, like the dog.
Backyard chickens.
Yeah, okay, great. Good
Terrible
example.
example.
At least animals, right? And then the other is, you know, about something that's on the agenda. So it can be done one of two ways. We can just bundle everything in the beginning of the meeting, and so public comment could be on either one of those things. Or we can have just in the beginning, the non-agenda public comment, and then we can have the public speak to the item when the item is up for discussion by council.
I say do it all at the beginning.
Well, okay, that's,
Keep it clean.
but is it, I guess?
I guess it's still a delegation from the public.
Yeah, but I mean, we could, at the moment that ordinance comes up, we could talk about it amongst ourselves, and then before any vote could be taken, or before even we talk about it, we could invite, they'd still be given the same whatever time limit.
Oh, if they're talking on a specific ordinance.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so would it be more appropriate to have them speak when the discussion of that item takes place? Or is there a disconnect by putting them first early in the agenda, and then, you know, a half hour later when the item's up, you know, there's a little bit of a disconnect?
I'm trying to think of, I've been to a lot of meetings, and I don't think I've ever had public.
I think it's been
seen-
done both ways.
Yeah.
That's why I'm
I don't think
asking.
I've ever seen it done to where you speak right before the ordinance. Have you?
I've seen it written, because I've looked at a lot of different examples of this.
I know in the past, like, I just went to a county commissioners meeting a couple weeks ago. And I was actually on the agenda, but I still had to fill out the form, the paperwork when I got there. I had to write what I was there for and turn it into the clerk before I went in, even though it was on the agenda.
On the evening of the meeting.
The day of the meeting. Well, I was already on the agenda because I was there, it was during the day for work.
Okay.
And so when I got there, I still had to fill out the form saying who I was and what I was there for. So they had that to document in their notes. But, and obviously we were, and in that case, we were on an agenda item, so I spoke at the agenda item. How would I think about it?
When it was being discussed. Well, so this is, I kind of put in your packet, I thought this is a really nice roadmap where the city of Worthington had done, and I think in 2019, exactly what we're doing tonight, only they had some different issues. They had some changes to their annual, organizational meeting and stuff. But I highlighted, if you look on your screens up here, agenda and non-agenda visitor remarks. And I'm not going to read it, but it says, non-agenda remarks happen earlier. Agenda item, public comment happens when the agenda item is under discussion. It doesn't say they get speak first or anything like that. It just says, visitors' remarks on agenda items will continue to be taken during the time when the matter is being discussed.
I've also been to meetings where the people that are wanting to speak on agenda items do that at the beginning.
Right, no,
And it's agenda items, that's who that is. And these others, which are the chickens, I want a stop sign here, come at the end after we've gone through
seen that too.
the agenda, business, the regular meeting, et cetera. I'm not against doing it in that way. They're saying that they separate theirs, the agenda and non-agenda visitor remarks. Where do they put their non-agenda visitor remarks? At the beginning?
let me see. I think their agenda is listed further up, so let me see.
Visitor remarks, non-agenda items.
Yeah, number 8.
Yep.
But that's before they start talking about ordinances. And they have witnesses, swearing witnesses, I don't know.
That's
And
what,
there's a consent agenda. So, now, here's the thing, and I think the people in the room will appreciate this. If we put public comments about non-agenda items at the end, then they have to sit through the entire meeting.
Well, I think it's good either right at the beginning and then when the agenda item comes up.
You like it at that point?
Yes, both because I'm picturing myself sitting out there, and a lot of times, if whatever item is coming up, sometimes someone, like I said, I'm picturing myself there, something spontaneous might pop up into their heads to make a comment or two about that certain thing.
Well, that would be problematic. We haven't got to that point yet, but I think we probably want to have like a form. And there's examples in your packet, or at least one, and then we had one from Andrew probably about a year ago.
Yeah.
And the idea in most places, including this one, and I'll kind of scoot to the end here, where their form is, it's not a very complicated form. You have to sign up before the meeting. It doesn't have to be a day before the meeting, as long as it's, I think, what does
before
this
the
say?
meeting starts.
Yeah, 30 minutes or something like that. So there would be some forms out there, and before the meeting starts, we would collect the forms. So you have to know you're planning to say something. You can't just be sitting out there without having filled out this form and then just start talking. So there has to be a plan by anybody from the public who wants to speak before the meeting starts, and they have to identify what they're going to talk about. So unless you guys think differently, that's the way most councils operate.
I know, yeah. I think that it's a nice organized way. It's a way to make sure we have everyone's contact information. Also for Chelsea to have it, so when she's doing the notes, she has the address and stuff, because sometimes people forget to do that when they approach the mic.
They
And then
often
that
say
way-
it before they approach the mic, too.
Right,
so.
and that kind of helps us organize where that person needs to go on the agenda by filling out that. It just
Right.
kind of helps tidy everything up a bit.
Yeah, I like this. This is a simple form. I think I have Andrew's form here. And it was a little, maybe it was more informative, but it's a little busier, and I don't know where it came from. It said revised March 2020.
He
So
got
obviously-
it from somebody.
Yeah, he borrowed
said
it
he
from
did.
somebody. Mentor?
Mentor, okay.
All right, so I kind of like the simpler form, this thing. And then, we haven't resolved the issue of when agenda and non-agenda visitors speak, but the council, I could have it right here, and then I could call somebody, and then they could come up. They don't have to
Yeah.
say their name, maybe as a format, could swear them in if we wanted to, but I don't think that's necessary.
No, but that does give
But-
you the
but I like
opportunity to
this-
organize and call them up one at a time.
Yeah, I like this little form. What else do we need, right? And we could just let them know. It could just be, and maybe we could add to the form the amount of time. So let's make sure we sort of focus on making some sort of understanding about where we're headed. All at once in the beginning, or non-agendas in the beginning, and agenda, comment during the item.
I think it should be
Opinions.
all at once at the beginning. I think that
All in the
having,
beginning?
that doing public comment on each ordinance is the transition as we're going through is gonna be harsh if we have people getting up and talking at every, or do we have that? I don't know.
No, I think, that's a good, I think the idea would be that you'd have to fill out this form, and really you get to talk about one thing.
Yeah,
Pick the hot topic for the evening and then write it on here. So again, I don't know, I'm kind of leaning towards during the discussion, only because it seems to, I think it may lead to a better discussion. I think there's a disconnect when somebody's talking about an item that we don't really discuss until a half hour later. Seems like there's, I know it's a little bit less organized.
well, that's the importance of the form and keeping everybody on track and not allowing just anyone, like, they have to sign up to talk about that specific. We'll keep it more organized.
How often at the regular meeting do we receive a comment that causes us to change the ordinance?
I don't know, I don't have I don't have an
Do
example.
you recall it ever happening?
We're already on our third week of talking, our third,
I can't remember.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I've gotten comments from the public
Yeah.
that have, before we've done anything, that have made me rethink about stuff, but I can't say that at the moment that the meeting's being held, that somebody's made some, sort of comment that just made us rethink, the council rethink things. I just think in terms of continuity, it seems to make sense to have a visitor talk about an item when it's on the table for discussion, not a half hour earlier. We don't have to decide everything tonight.
yeah.
I'm okay with it either way, I guess.
All right, let's, maybe we can ruminate on that one. But, so what
I'm not against all at the beginning either, though, so.
okay, let's put a pin in that.
I do like the simpler form, though,
Yeah,
where it just says, not on the agenda, on the agenda, this topic or that topic. That's very
yeah, we want to know what
reasonable.
what they want to talk
Yes.
about, even if it's not on the agenda, we want to
Yeah,
know what it
yeah.
is. Okay, so my plan is to change 2010 and kind of take out, or we could still leave in the part about shall ordinarily list the identity of the person or whatever. But I thought we'd make that A and then put in a B that more descriptively says how we're going to define public comment. And that's where we can hash out whether it's all at one place or if they're occurring. All right, so here are the things these are things to consider. So how long? It seems to me most places, and I don't know how they came up with 3 minutes, but 3 minutes seems to be the one time amount or limit more common. 5 minutes is okay, as long as it's a limit, and it certainly doesn't have to be a full 5 minutes. People can take less time. But what do you, are those 2 minutes critical, or I don't know?
Do we have that anywhere in any
No.
of the ordinance?
There's nothing in our
There's-
ordinance.
It's a verbal.
Yeah.
I think 5 minutes is fine. I do. I feel like we're going from nothing to something. So I think 5 minutes is not as restrictive.
Have we really limited anybody?
Oh, and
Except whenever somebody's talking
No,
a long time.
We've never limited anybody, and I know.
I've seen some people, supposedly they've been told 5 minutes, and they've gone 20, 30 minutes.
But I think it's nice to have a limit, so then when someone comes, they know that this is what the time that they have, and that they can't, that, you know, to be respectful of everyone's time, including their own.
Yeah,
that it's
encourages them to
nice
be
know-
prepared,
Yeah,
right?
they're gonna be prepared for that 5 minutes and gonna,
Like Carol Chambers the other day gave a very succinct presentation.
They should have a grace period along with that.
Well, what we can do is, and other councils
You
do
think-
this.
No, you
If
don't
somebody's-
agree with that?
if
I'm
some-
laughing because in my mind, I was thinking, I've been in meetings where they have a clock.
Yeah.
And the clock
Well,
sits up
oh,
here.
yeah.
And
We're getting one.
it starts at 5 minutes and it goes down and it's green from 5 down to 1 minute, and 1 minute it goes to yellow.
yeah.
And
30
then
seconds, right?
you get ready to go out. We could
Yeah.
even have something like that.
Yeah.
That's part of constraints and time management of public speaking.
Yeah, well, look, the 5 minutes is just, you know, that's the allocated time. Now, if somebody's talking and they exceed or are going to exceed the 5 minutes, council can give them more time. We could also say, hey, you know, let's, you know, maybe
Yeah,
it's maybe
discretionary.
it's somebody who came with the report we asked. I don't know, well, that doesn't make sense. But if it's something compelling and we don't want them to stop, we can certainly informally give them more time. But the standard would be about 5 minutes, and I think that's more than most councils give anyway. How often? So Akron limits one visit each 30 days.
I don't know if we need to limit
That's
how
ridiculous.
often.
Well, when you think about it, we only have one and we're talking about the regular meeting. you know.
Yes.
We're not talking about the
We're just
committee
talking,
meetings.
right, we're talking about.
So we only have
regular
one
meetings
every,
now.
you know, so that's one.
Well, what I'm saying is if someone wants to come other than that and make a comment.
Well, we're just talking, these questions are just about the regular meeting we have once
So,
a month.
so the 5 minutes, is it 5 minutes for one topic, or is it 5 minutes per topic? So if I wanna come and I wanna talk about the
3 different
roads, the
things,
snow plowing, and the school levy, do I get 15 minutes, or do I get 5?
No, you get 5 minutes, and really you should be talking about one item.
That would be 5 minutes per each thing.
You know, there is an opportunity, I feel, too. So if a citizen comes to council before they even get to the actual meeting and they have a concern about something, let's say they email Chelsea or one of it gets contacted, like sometimes the resolution for that constituent is just being referred to a department for a particular need.
Right.
So is there an opportunity we can say, hey, if you're really mad about this, this is who you need to talk to get some more information. But if you fail to get resolution, follow up with us.
Yeah, you know, that's a good question, but sometimes we don't know whether they've already, see, we'll get people come up and say, well, I've already talked to so-and-so. I've already talked, that's why they're there. That's why they're coming, because they haven't gotten their problem resolved. Now, the ironic thing is, this is the last place they can come to get an administrative problem resolved, because we're not the enforcement agent of the city. But I would hope that before Chelsea gets a request from a resident to speak at a regular council meeting, that they've gone through some vetting of their problem. You know,
Sometimes people don't know, and that's the issue we have, is they don't know who to go to, so they're coming to us to ask for who to go to.
well, that's fine
Which is-
too. I don't know that I think we get to a little dangerous territory if we start regulating what topics people can talk about.
Oh, no,
I
I'm
mean,
not-
if they're completely off the wall, that's one thing, you know, but if their topic is important to them, even if we can't necessarily do anything about it, I think we give them a launching pad to talk about it. And then we can request or suggest an action for them to pursue if we can. But a lot of times, it could be somebody who wants us to write some code about limiting the number of dogs people can have, right? You know, or they want us to write an ordinance to allow chickens in their backyard. So those are legitimate reasons to come before us. But, you know, you mentioned Mrs. Chambers, that's a parking issue. And the only legislative
still
thing we
going.
could do maybe
Yes.
is you know, put in some parking restrictions. That might be something council can do, but, all right, anyway, so, we already discussed this one. We haven't decided yet whether we do the non-agenda items separately. Okay.
I do feel though for some folks to come and just have like a brief concern or a question or just to give us information, because I've seen a number of folks over the years, they'll sit through an entire meeting, they'll say one thing and there might be a couple things after, but then they just leave. So I do feel that if someone's coming in for a non-related thing, it might help be more expedient for their time to come in, say their piece, and then, you know, get back to whatever their evenings are. So just as a
Well, that's why I
thought,
want to put
yeah.
it in the beginning and not at the end. Yeah. So, okay, I added one more thing here, because it's been mentioned, you know, what if somebody wants to talk on more than one topic, things like that. We could have a standing rule, and I've seen this in other bodies, where the public doesn't just get to comment whenever they want to, but if one member of council, or maybe the mayor or I, want to recognize somebody, we can allow it under those circumstances.
So if we're talking about something happening at the water department and a staff from the water department sitting in the audience, we can certainly invite them to share information.
So in other words, when it comes to the public comment part of this, we can have sort of a backdoor approach in a sense that we can always recognize somebody to talk. But and I don't know how people feel about that, but I've seen that at other places where there's not even like I served on the faculty senate at Kent State University. There's no place for public comment. Anybody who's not a member of the Senate has to be, an observer has to be recognized by the chair before they can talk. And that usually comes with a senator or somebody saying, I'd like so-and-so to talk, and then the chair decides whether to allow them to talk. This would be a little bit more open, where any council member who wanted to recognize a member from the public to talk about an issue could do it.
So my employer now, the way we do it is you have to let them know ahead of time, so many days ahead of time, there should be public comment on what the topic is, and there is no comment during the meeting. It happens at the beginning.
Okay.
You can't just stand up and ask questions. It's after the meeting is over that you go up and ask your questions at council. So I can't just say, wait a second, how come, why do we have $6 million in our budget? I thought we had, like, we're not allowed to do that.
Well, which is, you know, as we look back and reflect on the last couple of years as we've gone through things, we sometimes have had issues where someone just wants to ask a question out of the audience and stands up and asks the questions, and many times, or make a comment, we don't know if the information that they're saying is accurate, or if they're asking us to respond to something, it gets us in trouble sometimes. It's, why don't you do this, or why haven't you done that? I would lean toward a more formalized way of having them speak, like what we're talking about doing. It just seems like a real free flowing, that anytime something comes up that someone wants to speak on, we say, okay, you can do it.
Well,
It's appropriate in committee meetings, I think.
yeah, okay, well, we can talk about the difference
Yeah.
between a regular meeting and a special meeting and a committee meeting, but I guess the only reason I brought it up is because I have seen it done in other ways, in other places, and I think it depends on sort of the understanding that members of council don't just do it haphazardly. Like, maybe they had a discussion with somebody who shows up at the meeting, and, you know, say, you know, I'd like to have so-and-so, and they have to know who it is. It can't just, in other words, some random person can't just raise their hand and say, I'd like to recognize that person, whoever the hell they are. It has to be like, oh, that member of the public out there, I'd like to give them a few minutes to address this issue. But it would be your decision, not the person sitting down in the audience.
This is just our council meeting.
Yeah. And I would extend this to special meetings too.
So, but for like committee meetings, maybe,
We
could be very different.
yes.
Because I know those are a lot less informal than a council meeting.
Right. Well, let's, again, maybe tonight is a good night for just throwing things out there and thinking about them. and these are, I'll keep these ones here. We kind of decided on the 5 minutes, which is okay. We haven't really decided on public comments during, all being bundled at the beginning or separated to when agenda items occur. And then this idea that I just threw out there about allowing somebody to speak, we can think about how to roll that out as well. And they'll be put into this open section I've created in our ordinance 2020-10 when we talk about public comment. Any other issues? Now, do you want to talk about public comment during committee meetings now? Or how do you want to handle that? Because I do want to talk about consent agenda next,
Let's stay on the,
public comment.
consent agenda
Oh.
and the regular meeting, to work
Okay.
all the way through the regular meeting.
Okay. All right, well, we did finish the agenda. Let me see where, all right, let's talk about the consent agenda. All right, so the consent agenda would typically be things that we would normally just, well, there are some examples in, oh boy, my computer's acting weird. So here are some examples of, topics that are routine, recurring in nature, procedural decisions, non-controversial items, items previously discussed for which the team has come to a consensus, things like minutes, financial reports. We don't really have mayor, county executive reports, committee appointments, staff appointments. We've kind of already run through the typical things that we do in a consent agenda. Now, the question becomes, do we bundle in regular ordinances and resolutions? And that's a tricky one, and I struggled, and I talked to the clerk about this a few different times, and tried to come up with examples of what types of regular ordinances you would include in consent agenda. So one of the problems that I confronted was any regular agenda item, an ordinance, we have to decide, it's normally supposed to go through 3 readings. So there's a vote to decide to waive the 3 readings. A lot of them, if not, I don't want to say all of them, but very few of them do not have an emergency clause. I want to talk about that separately in a second. And then there's 3 different votes, and I know, Dr. Kalfa, you've been talking about how can we make that more efficient. So I want to talk about the emergency clause in particular, because the other, the waiving of the 3 readings doesn't really concern me. But there's a component of the emergency clause that has always bothered me. Because, in state law, anything that we vote on without an emergency clause has to take 30 days before it becomes law. Now, the reason it is, and I don't know that most people understand that, the reason is because by state law, the public can challenge any ordinance that we approve through a petition, through a ballot initiative. So if we raise our water rates and we do it as an emergency measure, we eliminate the possibility of the public interceding and saying, no, wait a second, we don't like that. We want to go through our normal, we want to exercise our rights, and we want to challenge city council in their decision to raise our water rates. So, every time we make that vote for the emergency clause, I cringe just a little bit because I always wonder, is there somebody out there who wants to challenge us? And they have a right to do it, except when we approve that emergency clause. We've taken away that right because they have no time to collect the necessary number of signatures. And by the way, if they do collect the necessary signatures and present them to the Board of Elections, then we can't initiate whatever that ordinance was until the next election cycle when the public gets to vote on it.
I feel like we lost the purpose of the emergency clause, right? So an emergency
Well-
is like when the water treatment plant needed to purchase that equipment and it needed to be done yesterday, or we
Right.
weren't gonna have, that's an emergency. So I
Right.
guess what's defining it, right?
I think what's happened, though, is.
Everything's an emergency?
Yes, it's just, that's the way it's developed. The way
Nobody
it's-
wants to
for a
wait
long
30
time.
days.
The way it's developed is that everything that comes to us we vote on the
We
emergency
just do it.
clause of it, you know? We, just like the three readings is, we waive that except for some real important things that we
Yeah.
think are
Right.
changing.
Or
civic
the-
interest.
Yeah.
Or the contract hasn't arrived
Yeah,
yet.
right.
So it's a holding place.
Yeah. Yeah, so, right, we no longer have true emergencies when
what is-
everything's an emergency.
I just point that out because it's an important factor, I think, and by the way, you'll see emergency clauses all over the place, and we're not the only ones who do, we're not the outlier.
If we didn't vote on the emergency clause on the items on the consent agenda, everything in the consent agenda would go into effect 30 days afterward. So that's
Right.
the one way of doing it, is you just have a vote on the three readings in the passage and the emergency clause. Now, would that preclude then anything that was an emergency wouldn't go on the consent agenda and would be
Well-
out separately?
So first of all, I struggled with whether a single vote could accomplish those three tasks. Waiving the three readings, and enabling the emergency clause, and approving the agenda, or the item itself. And but I found an example, and it's the city of Akron, and I'm gonna show you one in a second here. You can, the answer is yes, you can do that apparently, because they do it all the time.
Yeah, if you read the charter where it says it'll be waived with a separate vote, that vote on the consent agenda would be considered an individual vote on each of the items. They're each getting voted on. It's not like they all passed together.
Right.
They all passed individually in a group, because the vote applies to each item in it, I think. That's my understanding.
Yeah. I wasn't sure because I couldn't find an example, and then I found, so here's an example of an ordinance, this is in the consent agenda for Akron for tonight, actually. It's, I believe, right, council agenda for June
Yeah.
24th. Here's a consent agenda, ordinance, all these ordinances, I'm just picking the last one, which is an ordinance to construct a splash pad at Elizabeth Park. Come on. And I just want to show the ordinance to make sure, where's it going? Is this it? Wait a second. Where did it go?
It's highlighted, number 9.
I know, but I'm clicking on it and nothing's
You
happening.
gotta pull it over probably, it probably opened up. I'm looking at you.
Is it somewhere in your,
Is, because you have the dual, right? No.
She does, but he doesn't, so
Okay,
he's
never
sharing a
mind.
one-to-one
here it
thing,
is,
so
hold on.
might just be on a different
Oh, you're
tab.
in
No,
meeting. It's,
I don't understand why it didn't come. Well, okay, here it is, never mind. I got it. It was me, it was my fault. But here's the ordinance, okay? And it's a little different in wording, right? The Director of Public, is hereby authorized, and so forth. And then, there is also an emergency clause for this, I believe.
there is, it was in the top.
Okay. Oh, was it? Yeah,
top.
there it is, and declaring an emergency. So, God
And then they
forbid.
put in section 3, though, that it is declared an emergency
Yes.
again.
Yeah, it's a standard language.
And
We-
then it says, provided this resolution receives the affirmative vote of 2/3. Okay.
Right. But my point is, it looks just like, the wording's slightly different, but it looks like just any ordinance we would pass. And it's for a splash park. It's not like, for emergency, water facility correction. And it's for $350,000. It's not insignificant. So, the ability to put this in a consent agenda, in my opinion, is proven by the fact that tonight it's in a consent agenda for, Akron's a lot bigger and different than us, and they probably put a lot of things in a consent agenda because they'd be hours and hours at a meeting if they had to go through all these. Okay, so just kind of proves the point that we can do this. But the question still lingers in my mind about the emergency clause. And I was wondering if one way we could do that is we could restrict what we put in a consent agenda to not have an emergency clause. Because, there could be someone out there who says, well, you know what, they're putting these things in the consent agenda to keep the public from, number one, hearing a full discussion, and number two, giving us the right to, challenge it.
If an ordinance passes with the emergency clause on it, there is no citizen redress of that ordinance, that it completely precludes them. They can't go back and say, they took away our right to appeal it?
Well, it's not really, I don't know that it would be labeled as an appeal.
Yeah, what is, yeah.
I mean, I guess they can go,
Address it.
depending upon what it is, they could get together and file a lawsuit against the city.
Yeah.
But I don't know that, but my point is the normal process for a challenge, and let me just back up and say it this way. The reason the state put in 30 days before an ordinance can take effect was to give the public the ability to file a petition and challenge it.
So I don't know if that necessarily, and I could be way off on this, I don't know if that necessarily has to be anything. I think that just might have to be a change in our behavior. I mean, it doesn't have to be written. We can just stop if we want to, right?
Stop willy-nilly using an emergency clause.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I mean,
kind of.
that's just, that's already in here.
That may, when we talked a while back, and I talked a while back about a retreat, I thought that would be the kind of the thing we would talk about. More of a substantive discussion about how we actually do our business and how it affects the public, rather than where do we put things in an agenda, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I don't know that we have if this is the appropriate place to interject that. But I just wanted to say that there are some concerns I have about, like a consent agenda and bypassing those other votes. And that's, it's not just the technicality of whether we can do it, it's whether we should do it. And
Part of what affects, what goes into consent agenda too, is our practice and our procedures within the city on how we're doing things. We have lots of things that come to us right on the last minute of needing to do it. The number of grants that we have that we're approving, applying for a grant, and the grant is due within a week or a couple of days. That seems like the majority of them are that way. They're
Yeah.
just a couple of days away. So if we don't have, and that item is a prime item to go into a consent agenda, but it's,
it's
a
not.
grant. But then when they come to us so late, we can't have the,
Yeah, my point, I guess my point I'm making when it comes to the practicality of using the emergency clauses, what you described seems like, why wouldn't we do that? Because who's going to challenge the city trying to get money from some other agency to help pay for a water tower or something? So the likelihood of although it may be taking away their right, but why would anybody want to do that, right? But when we vote on a contract with the county recycling company that's going to raise every resident's rates,
Why would we do an emergency
and we do an emergency clause, and I vote against it, that's why I vote against it. Because we're making a decision that everyone has to live by, and we don't give them an opportunity to challenge it.
wouldn't that argue that any of those that you feel rise to that level shouldn't be in the consent agenda then?
Either that,
Okay, so the
or,
consent agenda is so routine, so unremarkable,
Low risk.
that we don't care about eliminating the 30-day wait.
but here's the thing, you don't have to have an emergency clause. We can
option.
pass things in, whether it's in the consent agenda or not, but I guess what I was trying to say is, maybe we should have a rule that if it goes in the consent agenda, we don't include an emergency clause, because we don't want to look like we're hiding something and then bypassing the public right to contest it. And so what if if it's that mundane, unless it's a grant, if it's something that does have a specific time limit, then we could include it. But I think just more judicious use of it. Do you have to leave?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Thanks for coming tonight. I appreciate it. And if you have any other comments, feel free to contact me, okay?
I'm looking at a tracking sheet. Does this need to take effect immediately or within 30 days? So there's an option on here on the tracking sheet for it to be explained to us whether it should be emergency or not.
There was a while back when I kind of, pushed this idea a little bit, and we and Andrew was sort of making that request more often. And so we were kind of pushing people to make sure that that justification was there. I also wanted to mention, I'm not going to bring it up, but I looked at the charter for the city of Akron. They don't allow anything that raises their water rates or any utility rate to have an emergency clause. It's in their charter. So, look, if we have to apply for a grant and, you know, and it needs an emergency clause, I don't think there's a problem with that. The only concern is how do we make sure that 30 days, you know, I think that's the reason, the practicality of having to wait 30 days and then initiate a law is the reason we have so many emergency clauses. People just don't want to, the bureaucratic process of waiting 30 days is becoming convenient for a lot of cities.
Especially if you throw on 3 sets of readings as well.
Yeah, well, right. Okay, so again, food for thought, mull it over, think about the emergency clause. Any other concerns about the consent agenda? And I think we need to we could slow roll this, right? So when assuming some changes are made, maybe the first things we bundle into the consent agenda are the typical minutes, reports, stuff like that. And then as we, you know, understand consent agendas and we can put some ordinances in there, you know, maybe when we get those $2,000 donations or whatever, things like that. The indigent attorney, you know, defendant contract that we do every year, the city food program for the summer camp, things like that.
Well, part of it may come out on the procedure that we have for placing them on the consent agenda. Some of those things may be addressed. Oh, this one shouldn't go because we want to wait the full 30 days. Yeah, we haven't talked about how they will get on the consent agenda right now. If you look at Worthington, who we've been looking at some, it says, you know, in general, it'll consist of items such as approving minutes, approving and accepting written reports that don't require discussion, approving resolutions and ordinances of a routine nature, and approving and accepting any other matter that's been placed on the consent agenda by the council president, who can choose which goes on there, any council member, or the city manager, which would be the mayor. Before voting, they'll ask whether anyone desires to have one separated out for individual consideration. If so, it's removed and placed on the regular agenda. So you were talking about that at committee of the whole,
Right.
each one gets a designation whether it can go on to the consent
Yeah, I'm thinking down the road that may be a simple consideration. Okay, so we've made some progress here. If we move on, does anybody have any other questions or concerns about the consent agenda? And again, we haven't really resolved anything. What I will plan to do is craft some language and maybe use that, that model for Worthington that I mentioned before. By the way, what you were reading actually was from this Civics Plus website.
Oh.
Not, yeah, those items here that I.
No, I was reading it off Worthington's handout,
Oh,
which used the exact same words, obviously from Civic Plus.
oh, a little plagiarism. Okay, I'm sorry. All right.
Right there, Worthington.
How do we know
They didn't
Civic
even
Plus
change,
didn't
they
take it
didn't even
from
change a
Worthington? We don't
phrase or a comment.
Well,
I like it.
We do that from time to time.
like it.
Okay, so.
What's the name of the site?
Civics Plus? Is it?
Civics Plus.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah. Okay, so let's move on. I don't want to keep you guys here too much longer, but I
Don't
think-
worry about, don't worry, I'm okay with,
I've heard you've recently had some free time available.
yeah, I'm okay, you're okay talking about this, come on.
Yeah, kids.
Oh, she's got
Well-
kids, okay, everybody else is ready to go, except me.
I wanted to go through our rules of procedure, okay? Because we never talk about this. We probably never adhere to this. And I'm not even sure what some of these things are or how they work. But basically, in our ordinance, we say that council can set up his own, charter actually says the council can provide its own rules for how it handles, conducts its business. And we've put in 2011 rules of procedure. This is the process we go through whenever we take an action, okay? So whenever an ordinance, resolution, or motion is before council, no other motions are in order except these following motions. And again, we rarely ever invoke these kinds of things, but it's important to know, and maybe we might want to change them. I'll just quickly point that at the bottom it says, all other matters follow Robert's Rules of Order, okay? So, so this, if it's not listed here,
Yeah.
then we fall back to Robert's Rules of Order in case something doesn't apply.
And forgive me for saying my experience this or my experience that, but in board meetings, sometimes we've said it's our policy that we follow Robert's Rules of Order. But we never really, Robert's Rules of Order are pretty complicated.
It's a thick book.
There's a lot of rules, and we've kind of tried to do motion, second, vote, all those things, table, et cetera. But court cases have also held that if Robert's Rules of Order are violated, it does not negate the action that a board took. So it's not, the Robert's
Right,
Rules of
I
Order
understand.
doesn't override any action that
No,
you've taken.
no,
So
and
it's just a procedure to help you run the orderly meeting.
Yeah, no, I only mentioned that we can set up our own rules. Our rules don't say we follow
Yeah.
Robert's rules to the letter. It says we have these rules that are up here, but if none of those apply for some reason, our fallback is Robert's Rules of Order, okay? So anyway, so something's on the table, you know? And by the way, normally in Robert's Rules of Order, you vote on, it's presented and there's a motion, and then you discuss it.
Yeah.
We do it at the end, right? And that's because that's the way we decided to do it, and we can do that.
No, don't we do a motion and a second, and that's when somebody jumps
No,
in that they want to
I will
talk?
say this, Chelsea will read the title, and I'll say this is from the Personnel Committee, and then you'll explain it, then people will talk about it, and then we start voting at the end. Whether
yeah.
to suspend, whether to,
Yeah.
and then the final thing we do is vote on the ordinance and we move on. What I'm saying is in Robert's Rule of Order, you typically vote to put something out there.
To open it up
Someone
for
makes a
discussion.
motion, someone makes a second, and then the debate starts.
Yeah.
So you use the motion to start debate, I think is
Yeah.
what he's getting at.
It's to open it up
Yes,
for discussion.
and that's what I'm familiar
And if
with.
it's not a discussion,
I just thought that the council president always moved it along quickly by sticking those other things
I'm
in
making
there.
that point that we don't follow Robert's Rule of Order there because we've made up our own rules.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay, so.
Is that good, though? Should we
Yeah.
discuss it right then?
Yeah, it's fine. I don't think it matters. It's a
Okay.
technicality.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so the first thing we can do is adjourn the meeting. I love the way this happens. And by the way, I've seen this happen. Like, let's say there's a disruption or the fire alarm goes off. You know, the first thing you could do is say, oh, we're going to adjourn this meeting and everybody get out. Okay, so that can happen. You can table the matter. We've done that. For the previous question, so in other words, we can suspend, somebody could say, okay, I'm tired of all this discussion, let's vote on this. And as long as, it has to be seconded, and then you vote on that motion, and then you just vote. So you end discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's when somebody says, call for the question.
Yeah,
Call
it-
for the question.
Cloture, yeah.
Call for the question.
To postpone to a definite future time. So we can say, okay, I'd like to move to vote on this at our next meeting or something. To refer it to committee, which we've done, to amend it, which we can do, to postpone it for an indefinite time. Well, I'd like to move that we never vote on this again.
Well, no, it's a time that we're not just saying the time, so we could vote on it any time, not a specific time.
Yeah.
That's how I read it.
Yeah, no, but the
Yeah.
point is,
It's like a pocket veto, though. You just table it forever. you know?
Yeah.
And then, so then it said the motions provided for in subsection A, so in other words, that's the order, okay? And then certain motions, 1, 2, and 3, shall be decided without a vote. So If someone calls to adjourn the meeting, you just vote whether you adjourn the meeting, you don't talk about it. Motion to consider a motion. Ordinance or resolution which has been passed must be made before an adjournment of the session. Okay? Does that make sense? Or reconsider a motion. So we
Yeah,
pass something.
Or fail something.
No, well, that's later, I think.
No,
Yeah, a motion to reconsider a motion, ordinance, or regulation that has failed
Must be
made
made
no later than the next regular meeting. And in either case, the motion must be made by one who voted with the prevailing side. In other words, somebody changed their mind, potentially.
wow, we've never done that in 4 years, have we?
No,
I don't even
I don't
100%
remember.
grasp what that says.
Yeah.
That's-
So something
It's
could.
convoluted,
Something could pass.
yeah.
And you don't like it.
Somebody that was on the side of its passing,
by the end of the meeting.
by the end of the meeting, could say they want to reconsider the
Right.
vote on
Like,
it, to
just
vote
kidding?
again. Change their mind during the course of the meeting, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes for
exactly.
very dramatic council sessions, I'm sure. We'll have to get some rating reviews from
Okay.
HBO if we start.
Okay.
And then the opposite, at least you have another month, right? A motion to take a matter from the table is in order under new business or the business which was being transacted when the matter was laid on the table. No debate except a brief explanation by the mover is permitted. This is where things get a little complicated, right?
We need a flow
So-
chart.
So something's been tabled, but you want to take it, so, during our first reading of something, we decide to table it. And then under new business, somebody could say, no, let's put it back on the table. Make sense? A motion to take a matter from a committee may be made by any member of council when a committee to which an ordinance or other matter has been referred fails to report on it or to offer valid reasons for failure to report on it. No debate except a brief explanation by the mover is permitted.
So if something comes to streets and sidewalks and Matt ignores it, which he never does, it's just a simple example. And someone else could say, well, we'll wait, and then put it back on the agenda. Is that what that says?
I think this one definitely confuses me. I thought, for example, we put the override of the veto back on the committee of the whole because it wasn't moved forward by that committee. But the committee is only a subset of council, committee consisting of 3 members. There could be 4 other members of council who want.
Has our thing
that-
started
yeah.
ringing?
I'm sorry.
It's
maybe I'm-
actually been ringing for a while for the
Has it?
audio. It also helps if you keep the microphone a little bit closer away if the gain's kind of high. So if you slide it back a little bit,
Sorry.
you're less
It might-
likely to
I
hear
hope
that
I'm not
resonant.
giving anybody a headache.
I think it
making
should
some
be
faces over
adjusted so that it doesn't happen no matter where we are.
And I hear,
Close or
I hear a
far.
little bit of it, but I may be further away
Yeah,
from
We're
the
too
speakers.
close, yeah.
So for example,
Take a matter.
maybe, I'm not sure if that's what it means, but maybe it means if other members outside that committee want that thing to be voted on,
So the committee did not push it through?
Yes.
But someone else would want to push it through?
yes. But I'm not sure.
I believe that's what it's saying, though.
It's kind of what
I'll
it
second
says.
that.
But it says what, it's kind of, the wording
It
is
says
kind
a
of weird.
motion to take a matter from a committee, to take it away from a committee,
Right.
may be made by any member of council when a committee to which an ordinance or other matter has not been referred fails to report on it or to offer valid reasons for failure to report on it. That's where it gets confusing to me, is
Has been
Yeah.
the reason is they failed to report on it. What does
Right.
that mean? Yeah.
That's the
I think
problem.
that's like if you refer
Or
like.
gave
if there's an
reasons.
issue-
Yeah, or to offer valid reasons. You even get to.
Yeah, well, okay, now we're really getting
you
into trouble.
can- you
Some
can
subjectiveness
Decide
there.
whether it's valid or not.
Right.
Okay.
And then the last one is all other I already said that. All other matters of parliamentary procedure will be determined by the president, in accordance with Robert Rules of Order revised. All right. So just, just for your consideration as we grapple with problems from time to time about how to proceed with something. Okay, the last thing I wanted to mention, and this is just, maybe this is all that I could find as a conflict. But we do have some conflicts, and we need to be careful a while back, I don't remember when, how many years ago it was, we decided to change our regular meeting time from 7 o'clock to 6 o'clock. So in 2020-01, under regular meetings, we made that change. You know, regular meetings will be held, and by the way, regular meetings is all over the place. You know, if we ever get into a discussion about executive sessions.
I was reading that tonight. I was thinking, yeah.
First Monday of each month at 6 PM. Now, under 208.04, meetings of council, it says in the last sentence, regular meetings and work sessions, which they mean committee of the whole, will commence at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
So
So that needs to be.
we need to be careful whenever we make a change, that we're double checking, and, you know, if you go to the, I tried to go earlier to show you the charter, but it wouldn't connect. You can do searches, and I often do that, you know, search for a certain keyword.
PM.
So I think it's just a point to make that we need to be a little bit more diligent about, you know, double checking we're not missing some other thing when we make a change. So it will affect this change as bundled into whatever else we make. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover tonight. I was hoping we could get done in an hour and a half, so we have accomplished that. But is there anything else related to these topics anybody wants to discuss?
I appreciate you taking the time to prepare for us to talk about this and looking at a bunch of the issues related to it. I think it's a valuable discussion for us to have. Why not look at our procedure and what we're doing rather than just keep doing everything exactly the same? I've appreciated the opportunity for us to talk about it. I think there's some good changes that can come out of this. I'm all for it.
I think as the city continues to grow, I don't think we'll have the time to sit and discuss every single ordinance. I don't expect us to become Akron overnight, but that could be a lot of business.
And just so people understand my sort of mindset, or maybe it's my philosophy, I don't know. But I've always believed for many years, work-related, somewhat in my personal life, I don't know if that holds up, in a philosophy of continuous improvement. Because I think sometimes we think, okay, we get to a point and everything's fine, and, you know, and that's all it has to be, right?
But the world
Well,
changes
the
while you're
world
sitting
changes.
still, yeah.
Boy, you took the words right out of my mouth. So we moved here, but, and maybe, you know, we caught up, but then the world changes and now we have to catch up with it again. So this isn't the end of a discussion like this. I think we continually talk about how we can better do our job as council members or president of council or mayor, or whoever it is. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring this forward, just so that it's time to review this stuff and you know, make sure we catch up with the world around
Yeah,
us.
I mean, the charter gets reviewed what, every 5 years. It's high time we do some of our own, you know?
Exactly.
The 2804, I looked, there's no other 7 o'clocks in here.
Okay,
It looks
good.
like that's the only one, so I'll put that on my agenda, although we do have a methods of conducting a bingo game prohibition ordinance, which I just discovered looking at that. I'll just
What?
point that out. Yeah, we have some really interesting ordinances in here.
Oh, for sure. For
But,
sure.
no, so we can certainly adjust that time for that and make sure that's something that I can put on my agenda for.
Well, so the process will be, I'll try to bundle, and we haven't come to any conclusion on some of these
Yeah.
discussions, so we'll keep that open-ended.
Yeah, for sure.
But I like the Worthington model, where they kind of set out an ordinance,
Search chicken.
and then they put in all these little different things. Now, it won't look the same, because, you know, we don't have the same type of organizational meeting. They have a city manager, not a mayor. So it won't be the same thing, but it'll be in that kind of format. And then it'll be presented at the next planning committee meeting, where we'll have even further discussion about refining some of the wording and so forth. Okay, anything else?
Great meeting.
Good start.
Good meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Well, we need to make the
Or
motion
I'd
first,
like to
so.
make a motion to adjourn.
Well, we don't even have a quorum anymore.
So moved.
Second anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, meeting adjourned. You turn off the-
Where I stumbled upon the coloring of rabbits. Or
Oh, yeah. Color rabbit.